Hello guys, and welcome to, I guess, my first real life video. Anyway, this is Tyler here, and I'm going to be doing the college football. It's kind of like I would say like a reaction, kind of the top 25. Technically, I have this notepad I have here. I'm gonna write it. Technically, what I'm gonna do is write it down and then give my reaction on like how I think that is actually true or not. But anyway, so for this, I'm just going to look at the rankings, say, okay, this is where I think, just go. Okay, and go ahead and get started. So the first thing is that I'll name the teams that fell out of the top 25. Michigan State at 17, San Diego State, TCU, Texas, and Georgia all fell out. Looking at ESPN's thing on my laptop here. But yeah, those three teams, I think Michigan State, though, I think is a team that should be ranked. I just don't think they're as talented as they were a year ago. Let's put it that way. I think, Tyler O'Connor's a good quarterback. I think they have a solid team. They're just not a playoff team. And I think they're a team that could possibly be Michigan or Ohio State. But I don't think they're the team they were a year ago. I'll put it that way. Texas, I think we overhyped them a little bit. I think I was one of the ones too. I'll admit it. I thought they were back. But I think Notre Dame was not as good as we thought they were. And that's what it came down to. And that's why that win looked a lot better than it probably should have. San Diego State, they were, Georgia. Georgia, I think, was overhyped a little bit too after they beat North Carolina. I think the new quarterback they have, what's Ellis or whatever. I think that's his name. Let me make sure that it doesn't have a little thing I can click on. Anyway, but yeah, I think he's a good quarterback. He just needs time to mature, and I think they overhyped him a little bit. I mean, he's the number one recruit. He's good. That's not disputed. The thing is, he just needs time to grow. That's it. Okay, so we'll go down to it. So number 28, technically, according to if you use the letters or whatever, if you use the others that receive votes, is LSU. They got 49 votes. 29th was North Dakota State, which I get it why they're on there, but I don't think they should technically be ranked. I don't know. They won't be ranked in the college football playoff ranking, so that doesn't matter. LSU, I think, was overhyped before the season started a little bit, maybe, but Leonard Fournette, I think, is a good running back. I think the problem is when that's their only thing they can go to. It's like if you can only pass the ball, teams will game plan for it and will take it out. And it's, Fournette finally got taken out, and that's what's happened. And I think that other running back they have, I forget his name, off the top of my head, but he's pretty good. And I think LSU will rebound and be they're going to be an 8-4 team, and that's the thing about it. 8-4 team, they're going to be a decent team. They're just not the college football playoff team that everybody thought they were. UCLA is kind of the same. UCLA is a good team, a solid team. Obviously, if they're 27th, that quarterback, I forget his name. There was a good Sports Illustrated article on him. I remember a few weeks ago. I think it was a month ago. I read it a few weeks ago. I sometimes miss the Sports Illustrated. I sometimes don't get behind in them and then read up real quick. But yeah. But there was a good. I think UCLA has a few more years to go. I think has to improve a little bit before they're get seriously put as a playoff team. They're a good team. Okay. So next one, other receiving votes. Who's actually Western Michigan is 26. They're 20. They're actually ranked in the coaches poll. I think so. But Western Michigan's a good team that I think Western Michigan is going to be the team that gets destroyed by the fact that Houston could possibly go undefeated. And I don't know if Houston's going to make it to the playoff because I think I don't know. It's going to be tough. The whole thing's going to settle itself out, though. It always does. People talk about, oh, there's going to be a team. It's just like, yeah, that'll settle itself out. It always does. The only year I can think of where it didn't settle itself out, where we can say that it was like 2004, and Auburn went undefeated. And a few years ago when Alabama and Oklahoma State, that whole thing. But usually it settles itself out. There's a clear number 1 and 2. And then, now there's a clear one. Now, a few years ago, there was also the Ohio State, Baylor, TCU thing. But, at the same point, I think the Big 12 kind of hurt itself by not saying that one of them was the Big 12 champion, even though Baylor you'd have to give it to Baylor. But anyway, that was beside the point. Let's move on here. We're going to spend all day here if I don't. Okay, next 25. Now we're getting into the actual rankings here as we have Virginia Tech. Looks like Frank Beamer's old squad is doing good. Frank Beamer, I had a lot of respect for that guy, and I saw him play last year because I'll admit I'm a Purdue fan, so obviously we're not seeing my team up here. No, but Virginia Tech is a good team, and they always will be. I mean, I'll look at their stats real quick. I forget. They're always going to be up there. It's just one of those teams that always is going to, always going to be there, always going to be relevant. Jared Evans, that was his name. I couldn't think of his name. And I had a link, so I was going to do it. Jared Evans is a decent QB. He's thrown for 13 touchdowns already this year, which through how many games they played? 4 or 5? It's tough figuring it out. Okay, they've played 4. They're 3-1. But, I mean, that's not bad. I mean, that's 253 yards a game, which is 51st. But, it's better than a lot of teams. There's a lot of teams nowadays that are focused on one thing, and Virginia Tech's not, I guess. It's kind of, I don't know. Anyway, next is Utah, which, okay, Utah's 4-1. Let's go ahead and click on them. Let's go ahead and put them down. I'm writing them down in this book as we're going. So Utah's only loss was against Cal, which is not a bad loss. I mean, Cal's a good team that I think they're trying to find themselves. I think the point was is that when they lost Jared Goff, I think that's going to be a tough thing to do. And I think that if, but anyway, Cal's not a top 25 team. We won't discuss them too much. But Utah's a good, Utah's one of those teams that I feel as if always somewhat is always there. Like, they're always around. Like, they're not going to sit there and, their points against is 18.2. And they've played Cal, BYU. They haven't probably played anybody other than, like, SC. I mean, the teams that they have played, that's why they blew out their... But, like, even then, like, Cal was a pretty offensive-headed team, and they only got 28 points, which you might say to yourself, well, that's a lot of points. But, I mean, it's Cal. There's a reason it's called the Bear Raid. I mean, they're a good offensive team. So you have to just look at it that way. What's going on here? Making sure, okay, it's uploading. I have another video uploading. Dirt Showdown 3, which you would have seen yesterday. Okay, so 23 is Florida State. I think they were way overhyped. Francois is a good team, and a good team, good quarterback, and Delvin Cook is a good running back. I think I said that all right. Who knows? I just think they need another team that needs time to grow before we can throw them into that. I think the point is when you go to 3 straight years where you would be in the New Year's Six, and then 2 years in the New Year's Six, and then another year where you won the BCS won the national championship. You kind of get hyped even when you're probably not as good as you really are. And the point was, I think that's what happened to Florida State. And even like I'm looking at my top 25 here, I had them at 12. I kind of saw that, but at the same, because this is my top 25, 28 before the season started, and I had them at 12, because I really didn't think they were gonna, yeah, good. I also had Clemson 11, which is a big mistake. But do I even have Louisville on this list? No. I have Notre Dame at 23. Guess who saw that coming? I was not a big fan of Notre Dame. I thought they were gonna do what they did. Yeah, I'm just looking at this list again. But anyway, Florida State, I just think they need time to grow. They are led by a freshman QB, a running back who's still a junior, but at the same point has missed time. So I think that's a team that I hope Cook comes back, because I think that Florida State team next year could be amazing. If Francois can continue to develop the way he needs to, that team's, the problem is they're young. And that's going to be an issue for, that you can't escape that. That's just something you're not going to be able to escape. Next one, we got West Virginia. Everybody seems to be on the West Virginia bandwagon for some reason. I mean, like, I think they're a good team, don't get me wrong. But, I mean, when you have your only 4 wins are against Missouri, Youngstown State, BYU, Kansas State. Let's wait until you have to go at Texas Tech versus TCU, who's a decent team, at Oklahoma State, at Texas versus Oklahoma and Baylor, and we'll then talk about it. But at the same point, I think they're the Big 12's last shot outside of Baylor. Because I think the Big 12's lost their perennial teams that, just by name would get there. But the college football playoff, like Texas or Oklahoma, if they have won or lost, they're in. Because, it's Oklahoma or Texas. They're in. I think West Virginia could be the team that goes undefeated out of the Big 12. They're the team that has a shot to get back in, along with Baylor. But I think those two are the only chances, because I don't think any other teams are going to in. Next one, we have Colorado, who's a surprise team, who I mean, their only loss was at Michigan, which, I mean, how many teams go into Michigan and win? I mean, especially now that when Harbaugh's the coach. Not many. And, like, I think the only home loss he's had is Ohio State last year when he got destroyed. And then, that Michigan State game, which was weird in its own way. But Colorado's a good team that I think I'd wait a little bit longer, because then they have to go versus Arizona State, who's also a good team in their own right, which I don't think they're not ranked, but I think they'll get up there if they continue to do decent. Did they lose last week? Yeah, they lost last week, but I think they're still a decent team. Oh, this is the Pick Center. I was trying to find Arizona State's thing. And they lost to SC. That's not a bad loss. I think USC is better than people say they are. I don't think they're a playoff team or anything like that, but I think they're a decent team that, people just overhyped, and out they're not as good. They're just like, bury them. Next one is Oklahoma. They definitely fit into that the overhype train, and it's not anybody's fault. I mean, you would think that with Baker Mayfield back and all the other stuff they got back, I think you would have to put them in that discussion preseason, and I put them in that discussion. I'm pretty sure in my rankings they are, oh shoot, I didn't have any faith in them. I had 13. I'm 13th. I don't know. I think they were just one of the... Preseason, I had that feeling, and I did that when I had the rankings, but thinking about it later, I decided that, you shouldn't be concerned about it, They're not... I thought, okay, they're not a one-year wonder, they're not just Baker Mayfield's gonna, but at the same point, I think they're proving that, and their 2 losses have been against 2 top 10 teams, so... They're a victim of a bad schedule, too. So when I think they start playing easier opponents, they'll start to rack up wins, and then maybe they'll get back inside the top 10. I mean, obviously, I don't think they're going to be a playoff team by any stretch, because they've lost 2 games at this point. I think 2 games is the eliminator this year, definitely, even no matter how, no matter who you beat. If you lose 2 games, you're done. Now, there might be, I don't even think there's any exceptions to that. I think just 2 losses is too many. Ha ha ha. But anyway, let's go to the next one. Boise State, the Broncos. They're the only ones I think that have a shot at beating, at maybe stopping Houston from getting that bid, because they're named Boise State. But at the same time, Houston carries a lot of weight too, so I don't know. Boise State's just one of those teams that year in and year out, they're consistently decent, or good, or great. I can't think of the last time I saw Boise State and said, that team stinks, They're always a powerhouse, and it comes down to, they've built a winning tradition, and they can continue it. Next one's Florida. Florida is having the same issues they did last year. They have one heck of a defense, but they can't score the ball worth crud. I mean, that's what's going to run into, and it's... They just need to get healthy. And on the offensive side of the ball, I think they'll be fine. I think that team could win the SEC East if they can get healthy. If they can get healthy, and... No, they can't. They can't win the SEC East. I just forgot about Tennessee for a minute. I think Tennessee... Never mind. We'll get to Tennessee later. But I think they're a team that could, get to a New Year's Six Bowl because of the fact that if they can get their offense going, they'll not lose a game the rest of the year. And they might have a shot at the SEC East, because I don't know. Tennessee's playing all these close games, and they'll probably slip up once or twice. The question is, will it be twice? Because that's what's going to have to happen. They're going to have to slip up twice in the SEC. But that's beside the point. Florida has got to, win out and hope, But anyway, but all that aside, they're a good team. As long as they can if their defense is one of the best in the country, I bet if we look at it, their points against has got to be high, unranked. It's not high in number. Yeah, it's 11.6. That's incredible. Their most they gave up was 38 against Tennessee, and after that, they did not give up more than 10 in a game. I mean, that's pretty good defense, if you ask me, and I think they're just going to run into that issue again, where if their offense cannot get going, they're going to be the product of that, and the defense is eventually going to give up points because of that. It hasn't happened yet, but they haven't played like Alabama last year. They had the same thing. Next one, let me write down. Florida is 18th. Let me put down UNC as 17th. North Carolina, I think, was a team that maybe had another issue at the first game of the season, but I think it's a good thing they lost to Georgia. I think this year's first game of the season will not hurt them as bad as it did last year, because I think everybody looked at South Carolina and said, how did they lose to that team and be 10th? This time you lost to Georgia, who has Nick Chubb, and his first game of the season. And it seems like I think this time it's a more acceptable loss. Plus, if I'm not mistaken, North Carolina did not make the same mistake they did last year and schedule 2 FCS opponents, which is what killed them. I mean, if they wouldn't have done that, they would have been in the national championship had they beaten Clemson, which I don't think they would have last year. Yeah, their only losses, and it's 18 Georgia. But that's, that's beyond the point. Arkansas. Oh, we have the Razorbacks. They're pretty good. How much to say? Brett Bielema, decent coach. I don't know. I haven't watched an Arkansas game yet. I need to get on that one. I need to record on them. Everybody else, like most of these teams, I've already seen a game of them once. I've tried to record it or say something and like fast forward through it. But their only loss is to Texas A&M, so they're not. I think Arkansas is a team that's the product of an SEC that's strong. The fact is that they cannot get anywhere because of that. They can't be a powerhouse team. Like if they were somewhere else, they'd do better. Next team, oh boy. Next team, we have the team that went into the Washington and, we're not going to talk about that. Stanford. Christian McCaffrey got destroyed. I think Washington finally figured out a way to stop Christian McCaffrey. Now, does that mean he's going to get stopped every game? Probably not. I don't think it's possible. He's just such a good player. And the thing is, they're going to stay relevant. They've lost one game all year. Now, sure, it was by 44-6 to Washington, but Washington's also in the top 5? I think they're 5th. We'll see here in a minute. But they are just, they're a good team. I think they just had a slip up. And the point is that they only dropped the 15th. I think they still have a chance. I think obviously all these teams still do, except for maybe Ole Miss that's sitting at 14th. By this point, have a chance. I think that Stanford, good team, it's just they're going to have to win out. And they're going to have to, hope that Washington slips twice. I'm pretty sure they're in the north. Yeah, they're in the north because it's Oregon. I won't go into but they're in the north. And they're going to have to slip out twice. But at the same time, I think Stanford could run the table. It's just going to be coming down. What does Washington do? So that's going to be their main focus. Next is Ole Miss, who Chad Kelly's a really good quarterback, and that's the reason they're 3-2 and somehow 14th. And their only losses have been to what? Florida State and Alabama. Florida State at the time, I think everybody, it took a comeback. The problem is Ole Miss is not, in their losses, has not finished the game. And that's, whoa, we went away from the rankings there for a second. I don't know what happened. I think I went one too many back. Anyway. There we go. Okay, so Ole Miss, yeah, they're a good team. I think the problem is their schedule is just too rough in the beginning, and now they're all but eliminated. I think they're the only, no, they're not. I was going to say they're maybe the only 2-loss team, but I don't think so. I don't think they're going to be able to elevate over Alabama if they were to lose 2 games. Because I think at this point you have to win your conference championship to get in, and I don't see Alabama losing 3 games. So, yeah. Next one is Baylor, the Bears. Off-season problems, let's put it that way. But I think if you look on the field, sorry about that, I got called anyway. So I think I was talking about Baylor. Again, team that I think had some issues in the off-season, but good team. I think Seth Russell's one of the best quarterbacks in the country. I think they're the Big 12's only shot left. Again, West Virginia, I think, has an outside shot. But honestly, Baylor's the only team you can look at and say, okay, they're the Big 12's chance. And, yeah. Anyway, next we go to Nebraska. Nebraska's kind of a surprise team in a way that not many people saw it coming. I don't even think I had them. No. I think nobody expected Armstrong to be as good as he ended up being, and I think that nobody thought they would be able to. And they still have some tests to go through. I mean, they still have to go, let me look here. I think they still have to play Iowa. I think they still have to play, do they have to play Ohio State? I think they do. I don't think they're a playoff team. Now, because they still have to go at Wisconsin and at Ohio State. But if they can beat Wisconsin, then I think they could possibly go to the Big 10 championship game. Big 12 championship game. They haven't been in the Big 12 in years. At least that one kind of makes sense. I'll mess up. But anyway, yeah, they're a good team. I think they can maybe, if they can beat Wisconsin, they can go to the Big 10 chip. But that's I think that game right there is the Big 10 West championship game. So there's that. Next we have the other team, Wisconsin. It's funny. You beat, what was it? Two? No, one, two top 10 teams. And then you lose to another. But at the same point, I think they just need to get their offense going. If they can get their offense moving, they're like Florida. If they can get their offense moving and beat Ohio State and Nebraska, and have and those teams, they could have 4 top 10 wins on their resume. For some reason, I think I'm missing one. No, that's right. Yeah, because Michigan State is no longer. I mean, like top 10 teams when they played them on their resume, and not many teams can say that, and that would be a weird scenario where it could be 11-1 Wisconsin, or 13-12-1. No, it'd be 11-1. No, 12-1 Wisconsin versus a Houston team that'd be 13-0, and you'd compare the two. It'd be tough to decide a winner there, because they lost, but at the same point, Houston did not have to play the schedule Wisconsin did week in and week out. So you'd have to. Most of these teams left. It's going to be Houston is going to try to sneak into that playoff, but at the same point, they're going to have issues because of the fact that they play in the American, and the American is not what it. If American's what it was a year ago, I think Houston has no problems and is in. Problem is the American is not what it was a year ago. Temple's not that great. It's not as good as they were. Memphis is not anymore without what's his name? Paxton Lynch. Yeah, Paxton Lynch is gone, so obviously they're on. And Navy's no longer that big of a thing. Is not as good as team as they were. And so you start to have to look at it and say, okay, where do they compare with the teams that have played, top 10 teams on a regular basis? And how big is an undefeated record? That's what it's going to come down to, and that's what's going to be talked about in that committee room, I think. But let's move on. Next we have Miami, the U. They're, I guess, what you could say a surprise team. They're good. I mean, it's Miami. Can you really say you're shocked they're in the top 10? Sure, maybe the last few years they've had problems, but it's Miami. The last 30 years they've had a winning tradition in that place. I mean, it's you can't be shocked if they're there. They can get recruits. It's a place where you can get recruits and get all this and get going. They're a good team, and Miami will always consistently be that good team. I mean, if you look at it, what's their quarterback's name? I'm forgetting it off the top of my head. I always do this. Brad Kaye. That's why I can't, because I can't remember pronounce it. Kaye or whatever. He's a good quarterback, and Mark Walton's decent running back. I mean, if you look at it, there's nothing here really, I guess, screams great team. If you look at the stats and stuff, but here's what does, kind of. We'll say kind of because the schedule is, blah. But, they have ones against Georgia Tech, and Appalachian State gave Tennessee a bit of a place. But again, nothing here screams top 10 team. And then one at Georgia Tech's good, but we'll find out next week. If they can go they can beat Florida State and then they can beat North Carolina, then I think they're a team you have to look at and say, okay, here we go. And the thing is, if I'm not mistaken, they are in the same division as... No, they're not. They're in the other one. So it could be what you could look at here is a Miami versus Clemson ACC championship game, or North Carolina. I think those two are the two teams that can do it. Now it's going to come down to that meeting between North Carolina and Miami that determines it. And I think Miami will have a chance to prove that it belongs in the top 10, or it's all just, hype and their name. Anyway, next we have Tennessee, who has not played an unexciting game all year, I don't believe. They had to have played somebody not good, haven't they? They're an SEC team, so they're usually there. Yeah, they played Ohio that game was pretty close. They played Virginia Tech. I mean, Virginia Tech was Bristol with this racetrack. I mean, that game was exciting. I almost said Connecticut. Thanks, ESPN. And then they haven't played an unexciting game all year. It seems like. So I think Tennessee will just needs to start beating teams, and I'm not meaning like they're not good. I'm meaning they need to pound in somebody. They need to completely. They need to get that confidence up because their only win right now their only win in which they've won and haven't had, a really tough time at it is Virginia Tech, which is a good win because they're 25th. But at the same point, they gotta start beating people up if they're gonna try to get serious into the conversation. And they're gonna have to start beating up the teams they should. Appalachian State and Ohio should have been wins that shouldn't have taken as much effort as they did. If you're gonna be a top 10 team, no, I mean like if you're a decent team, yeah, I mean like those. No, don't get me wrong, those two teams are decent. I mean, Appalachian State's pretty. I mean, they have a history of knocking off top 10 teams, and Ohio is a decent MAC team. But at the same point, as a top 10 team, you should not have issues with those two teams. You shouldn't look ahead. And that's what I think they did a little bit against Appalachian State. But at the same point, you can't do that. Next one, we have Texas A&M, who is a team that we'll see if they can not fall into this October thing they've had the last few years. Last few years, I've just for some reason decided that, that month of October, we're supposed to play in it. No, but it's really fallen apart. And if you look at it, it's because of scheduling, usually. Because they usually end up playing the weaker SEC teams or, and this year at least they have the Arkansas game on there. But this year it's going to be the same thing. You look in October for Texas A&M. By the way, they play one less game for their benefit. But this is where the things are going to get real, and things are going to get real quick. Because you have Tennessee and at Alabama. Those two games, you have to split one of those. Now, which one's which, I don't know. I think the Tennessee game, I think that's where Tennessee could win. But at the same point, Tennessee is going to have to win that game. I think that game right there determines which one of those two teams, Texas and Tennessee or Texas A&M, is the only other team that has a shot in the SEC. I don't think Texas A&M, though. I think Tennessee has the advantage, though, because theoretically, for Tennessee, if they lose one game in the SEC and it's only to Texas A&M, they will get a shot at Alabama in the SEC championship game. And if they beat Alabama, I think they can get into the playoff with the SEC championship. Now, that being said, I think they still have to take this game seriously because if they can move up above Texas A&M, and this is the game where Tennessee can prove something. But at the same point, so can Texas A&M. If Texas A&M goes through and beats Tennessee, I think it'll prove that they're for real. Because Arkansas could have had a bad game. But that Tennessee game, I think, will be the decider in what comes out of Texas A&M's season. Next, we have the Lamar Jackson-led team, Louisville. What they did to Florida State should be almost considered assault. It kind of was. But Louisville's a good team, and I think they just are the product of having to play Florida State and Clemson. Florida State was not a great, but I think bad beats. What the heck is that? Anyway, I was just looking at something stupid, but I think Louisville gets a bad. The fact is they have to play Clemson system, and they can't play them in the ACC championship game. I think hurts them a lot. I think as if both of them were on the opposite divisions, it would be a lot better. Now it could mean that Louisville sneaks in as a second ACC team in the playoff if Clemson were to win or on the table and go to which I think Clemson is beyond proved that they're over the stupid stuff they were doing in the beginning of the season. I think they've finally proven themselves and probably said, hey, we can play when it matters. But anyway, we're talking about Louisville right now. But I think Louisville is definitely a team that could make the playoff. And I think once we get in these top 7, this is the teams that I think, honestly, have the best shot. And it's not because they're in the top 7 right now. It's because they are the best teams. Next, Houston. They're probably going to go undefeated. When I look at their schedule here real quick, let me make sure of it. I believe they're the only one at this point. Oh, that's right. They have to play Louisville. I forgot about that game. So, remember how I said Wisconsin and undefeated Houston team? I'm going to have to go with Houston on that. But the point is this. If Houston can run the table, especially now that I forgot about the whole Louisville game, that changes everything, doesn't it? Crap, I forgot they played Louisville. But at the same point, I don't see Houston winning that game. Houston's a good team, and I think they have something very special going on there, but I don't think they can beat Louisville. But if they do, I think they're definitely a playoff team. Now, the problem they could run into is that the top four right now, I do not see losing any of those four teams moving if they all win. And what I'm meaning by that is, how do you look at Michigan, who is beating up teams right now, and they finally beat a good team in Wisconsin. How do you look at them and say, okay, just because your only loss was at Ohio State, you're not going to be in the playoff? Sorry, but we're going to let Houston in. Or not Houston. Or, how are you going to let another team that if it has a loss in? You can't. Because of who they lost to, and the fact is they've done enough. But it's going to be hard for those top four to move. But that's a whole separate conversation. Let's move on to Washington. They are a for-real team. I think they proved that this weekend, beating up Stanford, holding Christian McCaffrey to 49 rushing yards, and hardly... You do that, and by then you've proven your defense is for real. And you've proven... Oh, I clicked Clemson. Whoops, how did that happen? Stupid. It moved on me, that's why. But yeah, Washington's for real. I don't think anybody can argue about that anymore. I mean, the fact is they've won too many games at this point. So, yeah. We'll move on, because I could talk about them all day. I mean, just the fact is they're 12.8 points against. They score 45 a game. And these are against decent opponents. Look, they're not terrible. I mean, Arizona's not a bad game. Rutgers is not a Big Ten team. Idaho's not good. But, I mean, against number 7 Stanford, they put 44 points up. That right there you look at and say, okay, this team's real. Next one, we have Michigan. What do you say about this team other than... It's going to come down to what happens with Michigan and Ohio State. I think it's one of those two teams is sadly going to be left out of the playoff, even though they're probably the top 4 teams in one of the top 4. And it's because, they won't win the Big Ten championship. It's one of those things where now when they put Ohio State and Michigan in the opposite divisions a few years ago and they changed it, I think now we're seeing why. They kind of did that at first. Because if these two teams met in the Big Ten championship game, they'd be 12-0 going in there, and you could safely say, yeah, probably, But at this point, one of them won't be able to play in that game and won't be able, But they still will have the Big Ten East, game at Ohio State. I think Michigan will end up losing that. But that's beside the point. Those two teams are going to battle for it. Michigan's a good team. They're led by not Spike. What's his name? I can never pronounce. It's one of those things that I know how to spell it. William Spay, yeah, he's pretty good. And Smith's a pretty good running back. And, they have wins against Colorado, who's ranked now, Wisconsin, Penn State, who's not a bad team. I mean, Penn State's going to give you a game no matter what. And here's their next few weeks. They go on the road against Rutgers, here at home against Illinois, but then they have to go at Michigan State, who could be a team that they lose to. Maryland, Iowa, I think Iowa's no longer that much of a threat. IU could be a tough game if IU continues to do what they can do. Okay, next we have Clemson, who Deshaun Watson-led team is, so not much left to say about them. They proved against Louisville, good team that, we already knew from last year. So that's not much of it. Ohio State, same. I mean, they were in the top 4 almost the whole year until they lost to Michigan State last year. But I think at the same point, they were still better than Michigan State. I think they lost that game. But at the same point, I think they would have put up a better fight against Alabama than Michigan State did. Now, does that mean they deserved to come before Michigan State? Probably not, because Michigan State had the tiebreaker. But I think they were the better team. I think they just had one bad game when it mattered. That's the problem. And, Next, we have the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, Alabama. Can we even argue? Is there any argument that I've ever heard that says they're not number 1? I just don't see it. They're number one. Until they lose, they're number one. The way they're beating teams up that are pretty dang good. I mean, they're beating up the decent teams. They're beating up the good teams. I mean, Ole Miss was the only game in which they hadn't won by more than 20 points. And even then, they controlled that game after Ole Miss had their little run. So, I don't know how you say they're not number one. I think there's no doubt in my mind they're the number one team right now. And, you know, it's going to be tough for them because then they go on the road, and they're going to have a chance to say that, hey, we're number one, and I don't know what you guys are thinking, because they go at Arkansas, at Tennessee, versus Texas A&M, and LSU. If they win every single one of those games, I think they're a lock at that point into the playoff. They're a lock into the big. I think they're a lock into the championship game at that point in the SEC. Yeah, I think they would be. Pretty much so, yeah. But anyway, this has been Tyler with week 5 college football rankings. It's going into week 6, so look forward to next week's episode, and, put what you think different, if you think differently than I do or something, just put it in the comments, put what you think of the teams in the comments, and yeah. Anyway, this has been Tyler with college football, review, we'll call it. I don't know. Well, I'll figure out some creative name for it. I always do. But yeah, it's been... See you next time. Bye.